starting to see a number of connections pop into the Zoom screen. So it's good to see more people are joining. Thanks to those who have signed on already. We'll start with about 1 more minute. Just always like to give people a couple extra minutes after the start time to make sure that they're not missing anything. My name is Michael Meyer. I'm with Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. And if you are in the West Coast, good late morning. I'll be discussing the IoT-Upgradeable Lighting Challenge this morning, or this afternoon for me at least. At this time, I'm going to start the recording of it, just in case people are unable to attend, that we can later share back the results. So I just want to give a heads up that we would be recording this portion of it. 1 second. Okay, I will now move into the agenda for this meeting. As I mentioned, my name is Michael Meyer. I'm with Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. We're one of the Department of Energy National Laboratories. Today's meeting you've attended is related to the IoT Upgradeable Lighting Challenge. During this meeting, I plan to explain the overall challenge concept to you if you're not familiar with the idea of the challenge or a challenge. Also then to really specifically discuss the IoT Lighting Challenge draft performance requirements. I assume if you're attending this meeting, you received an email related that was shared that included a link to the performance targets. We do have a link at the very end in case you haven't seen them, as well as we'll be touching on them throughout the presentation. We do ask that comments related to them are submitted about a little more than 10 days from now, on August 10th, to the email address there, lightingchallenge, all one, at pnnl.gov. But we're also here to solicit your feedback. We'd like to hear any questions or feedback you have today, as well as any feedback related to the overall challenge when you submit your comments. I think this point in the global pandemic, most people are familiar with how these meetings typically work, but I always feel necessary to explain it one more time. Just because of background noise, extraneous things, children, animals, many things, we've chosen to put everyone's phones on mute. We do ask that if you have a question, please enter any question into the chat panel that you might have. I am doing the majority of the presenting today, but my colleagues, Gabe Arnold and Kate Hickox, they are helping not only on this presentation, but on the overall program as well, helping respond to some of your questions you might have and help moving the process along on our end. So if you have anything, you can put something in the chat pane and they may be able to answer it. During this presentation, we are planning to ask a handful of poll questions. If you're not familiar with how those work, I will stop, I will pause, and I'll ask a poll question. We'll ask you to fill it out. It just helps us inform where we're going and feedback about whom you might be or what rationale for some value points. You'll see as we go in the process. I bring that up because that's our first poll question. So it's just helpful for us to know what is your primary job function. So this is a question just should be entering your screen right now, asking you to identify what your primary job is, whether or not you're a manufacturer, where you might be within the manufacturing realm, sales, different types of sales entities. See a number of people responding over on the screen. I will pause for about 20 more seconds just before. This is just helpful for us for feedback to get a sense of who is attending and job functions. So thank you for answering these questions for us. I think they're all mostly obvious of sales and design and architects and those type of things. Okay, at this point, I will then click the button related to ending the poll. And I will share the results just in case you're wondering what those results look like. Okay, so the main dilemma that most of you might be familiar with, but it's always helpful to restate what it is that most lighting installed today lacks the ability to upgrade into the future. Many light fixtures are installed without controls already, and if you want to go install a control or an IoT, and we'll talk about really in depth what IoT means in a second, you might have to modify that fixture in the field later. That can be costly because of labor, or you might have to replace the fixture outright. We know that the LED is already saving a lot of energy, and having to replace that may not be cost effective. So the idea is, it would be nice, and the dilemma we have is not being able to upgrade or install controls in a fixture after it's been installed in interior applications. Another dilemma that the lighting industry is currently facing is that lighting sensor ports and communication is not entirely standardized, making interconnect communication, interchangeability, and even upgradability problematic. And that's ultimately what we hope to explore and possibly address through this challenge. As I've mentioned earlier, the dilemma is related to upgradability. Current options for end users are, one, to install equipment today and risk changes that might have a problem in the future with that technology, or limit themselves now by installing non-upgradable equipment. In June, at the Department of Energy Better Building Summit, we asked this question to a large group of end users of what would they be interested in a future-ready type of upgradable light fixture, and if so, would there be a potential cost related to it? What did they value that decision at? And here you'll see that the vast majority were interested in a future-ready, something that could be upgraded in the future. And they also recognize that there might be a small premium and they'd be willing to pay for it. So it is what the end users are looking for, and that's part of what we're trying to address in this challenge. That's where we get to the opportunity. We're trying to bring together end users, and I'll talk about who we started to reach out to already, and we pool demand. And then we are trying to directly outreach to manufacturers, saying, look, manufacturers, there is this demand. People do want this product. And we hope that manufacturers would rise to address the challenges that, of this. It's very hard to not use the word challenge repeatedly, and I apologize for that. We hope that manufacturers would rise to the occasion and respond to the demand that exists. There's an opportunity to define upgradable technology requirements, and ultimately, as I've said before, challenge industry to develop a solution. I've used the term challenge approach before. It's very helpful to pause and explain this is a standard kind of program the Department of Energy has done before. The first thing I'm going to say, it is voluntary. Often when people hear Department of Energy, regulatory sometimes comes up in their head. This is not a regulatory program in any way. This is voluntary. The idea is it encourages the industry to address the needs of something. And as I've tried to explain earlier, and I will keep explaining, the need is upgradable lighting that can be upgraded for controls and IoT devices. I think it's helpful to pause and try to explain two past challenges. There have been others, but these are two kind of readily easy to understand examples. The pictures over on the right show exactly what I'm referring to. One is a wireless sub-meter challenge. The issue or what this was addressing was that sub-metering can lead to additional savings, but the problem was that once a building was built, it was really expensive to put a meter in as well as to get that data and those type of things. So this challenge worked with industry to develop a cost-effective device that could be installed after operation and wirelessly submit meter data and help buildings operate better. The other, which was very successful, is the rooftop unit shown over on the right. Again, end users were seeking more efficient air conditioners, and this challenge had a number of different levels of specifications related to different elements of energy efficiency and many different parameters. And there were a number of products that were developed in response to that challenge as well. So again, the overall concept of a challenge is, first, it's voluntary. Second, We're trying to, working with end users who've said, hey, we need this. This is something that's a barrier to energy efficiency. It'd be great if this product existed. And usually these products are close to market. And I say products, this isn't a far stretch. This isn't something saying, well, it's going to require a lot of novel R&D. The idea of the challenge is these components might exist in different parts, and when bundled together, that makes them the overall solution. Or it could be they exist, but until they're bundled together and the price is brought down, that's one of the market barriers. And that's what this challenge is trying to address. I think it's helpful to also explain some of the benefits of a challenge. Ultimately, by pooling in users, that's exposure for manufacturers, might lead to additional sales if the product is developed and they all ultimately purchase it. They are interested in it. I'll explain who we've talked to and what some of the feedback we've received already. But then we also do case studies. This is a real example from Publix, which is a grocery store in the South, of their RTU and how it was installed, and notice the big savings numbers and those type of things. And also this specifically, I pulled this quote out, it's actually recognizing the manufacturer who developed the product that met it. So this is, again, some positive recognition for the manufacturer as well as the end user who ultimately installed it and the savings they benefited. So it is ultimately trying to benefit both sides of the spectrum, the end users and the manufacturers, because ultimately we're trying to move the market along to a technology that currently doesn't exist. So why specifically the lighting challenge? Well, I've mentioned it a few times. I'm going to pause and dive into it right here. We know lighting controls save energy more than just replacing efficient equipment. The controls can add more savings. I've mentioned it before, and I'm going to say it again. There is a low penetration of lighting controls. There's a couple of reasons for it, but the fact is there's a low penetration of it. We also know that lighting can support IoT applications. Lighting is ubiquitous in every space. Lighting provides power. Lighting provides a physical platform for the sensor. We also know that there can be benefits, typically non-energy, for IoT applications. So therefore, it can help increase the value of the overall lighting system if it has an IoT feature of it. We know that upgradable fixtures can lead to greater savings, and upgradable fixtures can yield positive benefits to the end users through some of these new applications that are being developed. We first started reaching out to Department of Energy Better Building partners. If you're not familiar with the Department of Energy Better Building, this is a group, again, a voluntary program grouping end users by different sectors: healthcare, higher education, government, and municipal. Why this matters and why this is important. The Department of Energy has over 950 partners in the program, and over 12 billion square feet of space is represented by those partners. They actively want more solutions. They want to improve the energy efficiency of their buildings. So we first reach out to them through many different communication channels. We've had many ongoing conversations with them. We've also reached out to entities that are not part of the Better Building program for whatever reason. These are people we have direct relationships with as well. We have already about 10 to 15 different organizations who have provided quotes, letters of support saying, if a product like this existed, I'd be interested in possibly specifying it on my project. They range from a large retailer, large commercial real estate, to a couple colleges, to even school districts, a couple government agencies as well. So there's a wide range of different entities, both large and small, who are interested in a product that can be developed, that is upgradable in the future, and has some standardized features. We've also spoken briefly with some utilities. These have been initial conversations, and they do see value in some of the benefits. Utilities were able to get into some of the nitty-gritty details of it. They commented on they liked some of the diagnostic aspects available from the lighting. They also liked some of the energy reporting and asset management features of some of the things that we were proposing. They also had a high interest. You can see on the figure on the right, we asked them a rank 1 to 5. What was your level of support? And over 60% had a high interest, and about 28% had a 4. So let's call that very high or mostly high interest. So from a utility point of view, they understand some of the benefits. They've also been a big proponent of lighting controls. So they're seeing where this could help benefit their programs as well. Obviously, utilities have their own regulatory structure and other programs, so they'll have to figure out the details secondary after this is developed, but they see some value in this and interest. I've said IoT a number of times. I'm going to just kind of dive into it a little more related to lighting. So first, IoT is just the Internet of Things. I assume most people on this phone call understood what it was, but it's helpful to always to, kind of state it again and reinforce it. The simple concept is it means a connected device. It has a unique identifier and usually two-way communication. There's many different terms for IoT, but that's kind of the summary of what it is. And once you have that two-way communication and that unique identifier, you can then start doing more important and better applications. And that's where we see lighting playing a role. Again, lighting is in many of these spaces. You can do space utilization with it. Usually through the lighting sensor already, you can then get information about how much a space is being used. You could possibly do people counting. Both space utilization and people counting can also provide other energy benefits through HVAC and well, mostly HVAC control. So you're getting some secondary benefits. Asset tracking and wayfinding, you're using the different mechanisms. Maybe it's a smartphone or radio control, radio ID tag to help people find assets in medical equipment or in wayfinding, helping people find their way through an airport. So again, lighting can play a role in it. Again, lighting is there. It has power, and it physically can hold the sensor. So these are some of the IoT applications, and this is where most of the industry sees a lot of the technology going, and we're just trying to help address some of the end user needs. So I'm going to pause. I've kind of briefly explained IoT. I think many of you are familiar with it, or even more familiar with it than I am, and I'm going to ask another poll question. We are asking you to provide some feedback related to which one or two IoT applications do you think our most end users are willing to seek? So I've launched that poll on your end. So you can pick one or two. I am starting to see some people respond. Not entirely surprised by some of the numbers we're seeing related to space utilization and some of the other factors. So thank you. I can zoom in on the number of responses. So we'll wait about 15 more seconds. I think most of these are pretty obvious. I didn't mention air quality or Li-Fi in the previous example. Air quality, you could do carbon dioxide or a few other different metrics with air quality. Li-Fi and visible communication, that's obviously just using the light beam to deliver communications to other mobile devices. And audio detection is just telephonic or microphonic sound, and you can use that for maintenance, vibration, whether or not equipment needs to be replaced, safety. There's a number of features with that. We got a couple of others. Okay, great. We've got a number of responses. I'm going to now end this polling, and I always do appreciate you sharing, providing information. So I'm going to share the results with you as well. It does appear that space utilization and asset tracking are the two biggest, and then followed by people counting. So that is helpful. I think it's important to also share some information with you as well. So again, we asked the same question to the Department of Energy 2020 Better Building Summit. So again, a large group of end users, we asked basically the exact same set of options, and still space utilization and people counting came up. It's interesting that a number of people found in the previous question, you all found wayfinding a little more than they did. I can tell you that I think we assume that people counting and space utilization might be possibly somewhat COVID related. Who knows? But it could be that's why we're seeing such high responses right now. It would be interesting to see where this question was last year or in a year from now. But I just want to share results. These are, again, a large group of end users. We asked that same question, and these are what they see are the desired applications. Okay. I've provided a really high-level overview of what a challenge is, how it loosely works, some examples, why you might do it. Now I think this is why most of you are attending, and I appreciate any questions that we have received, as well as your ultimate feedback in that email address that I provided. This is the draft performance requirements. So at a high level, this is what we're talking about. We are trying to help move the market to an upgradable, easy to buy, install, and use light fixture that would have a D4i driver. We'll talk about what D4i means in a second. The Zaga Book 20 port, that's the interface between the sensor and the light fixture. We also have we also are focusing on some lighting characteristics related to efficacy and a few other features, and we'll touch on what the DLC is. That's the Design Lights Consortium, if you're not familiar with that organization, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then finally, we'll end at affordable. So these are the high-level performance criteria that we are seeking as part of this, and where end users have expressed interest. Oh, so now we have one more poll question. This is related to your interest in different types of drivers. So you have 3 questions here. One is, do you have a knowledge base with digital drivers / Dolly? We're just loosely defining a digital driver as something, oh, I will launch this poll right now for you. A digital driver is something that is a non-0 to 10 driver. And then we also have some requesting some feedback related to D4i. Again, this is an umbrella term. We're going to talk about it in a second. So if you're in the little or some or no answer, we'll talk about that, what all that means in a second. And then finally, Zaga, and we'll talk about that a little later, but that really, again, gets into the specifics. In this case, it's Zaga Book 20 that we're more asking about, and it's really relating to that interface, how the sensor and the fixture physically, mechanically, and electrically connect to the luminaire. That's where the standardization part is coming in, and that's kind of ultimately where we're asking this question from. I always try to leave an appropriate amount of time, and again, I appreciate this feedback that we are receiving. So at this point, a number of you have participated in the votes, and it's been about a minute since I launched the poll, so I will end the polling. Always try to share my results with you. So we have some general, some to extensive knowledge with digital drivers, a little less related to D4i, and some knowledge base with Zaga. Great. Okay, D4i. We are looking at the LED driver, the power supply, for it to be D4i certified. First off, let's talk about what that exactly means. D4i is an umbrella, and we'll talk about the standards that it involves in the next slide. But it was an umbrella kind of certification developed by the Digital Illumination Interface Alliance. First off, we're only talking about communication between the driver and the sensor, nothing outside the luminaire at the moment. We will talk about how that works in relation to it in a second. It's important to know that as of July 2020, when we developed this presentation, there have been products that are already certified and registered as D4i, and they are not, some of them are European, but there are also US manufacturers that are on that list. It's also important to know that while D4i it does have some heavy European overlap, there is some US efforts underway. Specifically, ANSI C137.4 2019 is addressing already the power and data aspects related to it, and there's more coordination expected. So this isn't something that US manufacturers are looking at, they are looking at it right now. I almost spoke in a double negative, I apologize. So this is something that US bodies such as ANSI are looking at and adopting certain elements. And as I said, there's more coordination expected. So it isn't a crazy idea there. Also, there was a recent presentation at Light Fair that you may have attended on the topic. And I think it's important to mention next month, there will be a IS topic on a webinar on the same topic as well. Why? So here are some of the benefits. This is a simple light fixture. You have LEDs. Then you have the green box is the digital driver. You'll have a sensor node and or a sensor module. Why this matters and the benefits? Well, at the factory, luminaire information is presented and programmed into the drivers. During operation, there is energy data that can be shared with the site, maybe for a dashboard or for a possible utility program. That's where some interest on both parties are related to that technology. During operation, this umbrella group of standards can help provide some diagnostic information about maintenance related to driver temperature, and then ultimately it can assist in the field related to commissioning. So these are some of the important benefits of this umbrella D4I certification and how it relates to a light fixture. It specifically all references different Dolly parts. A Dolly part is like a Dolly standard. So in this case, Dolly part 251 through 253 really get into the specifics of the luminaire, of the driver, and luminaire data, how it's stored, how it's cataloged, energy data, diagnostic data. That is all helpful information. And why this matters is that it can send that information to through a radio out to a gateway, which is what we'll ultimately need when we get to some of these larger IoT applications. The other elements that it does is it deals with an integrated bus power supply as well as a potential auxiliary power supply. Why that matters is that now a certain amount of power and parameters have been set aside from the driver to power some of these communication devices. Now we're moving along to standardization and allowing for powering of sensors for not only lighting control, but then also greater IoT applications. But as I mentioned earlier, this really the umbrella D4I only touches within the luminaire. It's only talking about the driver and communicating and power to the sensors. As of now, D4I actually has a kind of a working relationship with Zigbee, with Bluetooth, with Thread, and other networks. So from a manufacturing point of view, this doesn't prohibit communication with other gateways that your organization might be using from, let's say it's Bluetooth, or if it's TCP/IP, which is covered under Thread. So you could be ultimately communicating to the gateway with your own protocol. This does not prevent any of that. All this is doing is starting to standardize what's happening in the luminaire, which is the first step, and also helps with these upgradability features that we're ultimately looking for, as well as end users are looking for. Oh, I am now moving into another poll question. I appreciate all the active feedback that you guys have given us. So this poll question is just asking what do you see as the top 2 benefits of a digital driver? And again, a digital driver for our certain parameters is really anything that's not 0 to 10 volt communication. You could have a Dolly driver, you could have a DMX driver, you could have a digital proprietary driver, but we're just trying to get a sense of what everyone's understanding of the benefits of the 0 to 10, the digital aspects of the driver, whether it's energy efficiency, maybe design flexibility with the reorganization of your space. It might be that it's digital and you can get more characteristics and data rather than say 0 to 10, which has limitations, two-way communication, or you might not find a benefit from digital driver. And as I'm looking at the results, actually everyone has a benefit. So great, I will end the polling now and I will share the results. I appreciate some of the feedback that I have been getting. I will present at the end of the slide contact information, both for myself, as well as the greater challenge, as well as the URL for any more information. All right, so those are the poll results. It appears two-way communication, pretty significant feedback. Great, thank you. Okay, so I've kind of touched bases on, oh, sorry, one more poll question. So, general question is, what percentage of your products, sales, specification, or installation? Some of you might be business owners, some of you might be manufacturers, some of you might be sales. We're just trying to get a sense of where the market is related to digital drivers. We have some ideas, but it's always helpful to get your active feedback related to this. We just picked 4 equal quadrants, by the way, so that it's pretty easy to kind of answer this question in that bin. We're getting some feedback. I'll wait about 10 more seconds. I appreciate, again, the answers. Again, this helps us as we really kind of work the behind the scenes, developing responses to some of the questions and the feedback we'll get. It also helps us deal with some of the technical questions that we might have to address from end users, such as why, we understand why there might be a benefit in digital driver, but it's helpful for them to see it. Okay, I'm now going to end the poll. Share results. So it's a low percent, somewhere in the 0 to 25% is the overwhelmingly largest answer. Okay, all right. Okay, so I mentioned the D4i, which is the driver. We talked about that and what are the benefits for it and some of the whys you might do it. Now we're talking about the other performance characteristic, the sensor interface, and why we're talking about that. We're talking about a Zaga Book 20 interface. And when I say Zaga, or interface, think of it as a port, think of it as a receptacle. It's some bit of semantics. This was released in April of 2020. There are some US products that are undergoing testing now of this type of product. I believe if you go to their website and search for products available, you'll find a Canadian product. So there are some North American manufacturers who are already testing out and working along this way. Why it's helpful to focus on the Zaga part, it specifies the shape and the size. This is where the standardization comes in. It also gets into the specifics related to the electrical and mechanical connection. And why this matters is this is where we start moving towards standardization and upgradability. If they have these ports, designers can plan for, product designers can plan for sensors and they know how they get installed. I briefly mentioned it, but here it is. Here are the specifics. So there are 3 different options in terms of sizes and dimensions, 2 different rectangular sizes, 1 circular size. And again, I think one of the key features here is it's a standardized plug and connector. And then you also get into the D4i power and data compliance. Again, this is where you're making it easier for end users to install a sensor maybe now, or possibly replace that sensor with something maybe smarter. Who knows if in 4 years a new sensor will be developed that's needed in every building to deal with COVID or some other means. And by knowing exactly how that the light fixture can support it, that helps for some of those plans. This slide kind of really shows some of the benefits of why the standardization also helps. 1, it reduces fixture designs and variations. If a manufacturer has to worry about vendor A and vendor B sensor manufacturer, they're now having to modify it, that increases costs. It also reduces installation time. So this is a real project that I worked on that had about 2,000 light fixtures. The decision was that they would come from the factory, shown in the upper right, and then the sensors shown in the bottom right were how they were shipped. The contractor told us, or estimated an hour per sensor installation into the fixture. We did say that's pretty absurd. We had to go back and forth, but the overall end of the story is that increased the cost of the project. Had we been able to say, well, actually it's a standardized input that should take virtually no time, and partially because it's standardized, that would have helped address some of those costs. We know that costs related to installation is often a challenge to controls on projects. So this has helped reducing some of that. I've alluded to it before, and I'm saying it here as well. If a standardized port and interface exists, this allows product designers to design sensors and know a fixture can get in there. Know that a sensor can be put in that fixture. It also can allow for an easier competitive solicitation for the end user. Now they can get closer to writing a 3-name specification. Yes, performance will vary by sensor manufacturer, but if you have to worry about the physical size that sensor goes in that fixture or sourcing it, that makes competitive specifications much harder, and that can be a barrier to controls on projects. So this is help reducing some of those barriers. I've talked really in depth about the driver. I've talked about the Zaga port. Now it's helpful to pause and say, well, overall, this is really a light fixture that's holding both of those things. So why what we're talking about? Well, we kind of did some research. The typical fixture that makes sense to do this to start with is your bread and butter fixture, your type A fixture, the fixture that's kind of everywhere. That's your linear light fixture, whether it's a troffer, linear suspended, your high bay, your parking garage, which is technically an interior fixture, and your retrofit kits. Some of the research we found that it may be hard to put sensors in your downlights or some of your decorative fixtures. Not that it's not impossible, but it's hard to standardize around those. As well as these fixtures are doing a lot of the bulk in terms of providing the lights, so that's helping you develop your network. We did look towards the Design Lights Consortium's premium lighting efficiency requirements. We did not say it had to be listed on the DLC list. We're just pointing to that as an existing body of some performance metrics that the fixtures should meet. If you're not familiar with them, here they are. They have some tight color consistency requirements, not exorbitantly tight. It's just when you think of the grand scheme of color space, it's tighter than other standards. It does get into some discomfort glare. UGR, which is Unified Glare Rating, it varies by fixture type. We have heard that new fixtures are efficient, great, but they're glary, so this is trying to address some of that. It does get into some dimming as well as some driver requirements. And overall, one of the key efficiency issues here, or focuses, is that the premium requirements is a plus 15 lumens per watt over the standard requirements, which is shown down and below in the table to give you a rough sense of whether or not it relates to the different efficacy requirements. The questions are coming in. I'm sorry, I paused. I can get thrown off by questions in a good way, not in a bad way. Please keep them coming in. So I was just pausing to acknowledge the question that I just saw it. I don't have an answer for you yet, so we're going to look into that. But so what I am saying is please keep asking questions. Okay, I've mentioned this before. I'm showing you again, and this is a good lead into the price aspect of the question. We asked this question. I showed you this earlier. I'm going to show it to you again. End users, large group of them, about 80 people, said yes, they think it's important, and they also recognize there is a small price premium probably for this. And that's where this leads into they're willing to pay for it, but there has to be a limit to how much the industry probably would absorb for these two features. So that is where we get into this. So the performance targets does have a cost target. Sometimes when new technologies are released, there's a lot of effort to recoup a lot of R&D. As we said, most of this is pretty near to market. It's just about bundling it and getting it to hopefully at the right price to help it get installed better and more. So, and again, because the Zaga port, for example, is technically actually may not be used or providing direct benefit at the moment if they install the fixture, but maybe they don't put a sensor in for a year or two. There's an interest in paying for something like that, but it may be a future option, so they don't want to pay too much, is the overall feedback we've heard. So we are proposing in the performance targets that if these features all existed in a fixture, we're hoping that this would be able to be at about the lower of 10% or 20% adder or a $20 absolute dollar adder compared to an equivalent non-IoT upgradable kit or fixture. The idea again is that they understand that there's a price that may have to be paid, but kept that within bounds. And how we plan to do that through the method, because the lighting industry has its own pricing channels and many factors, we are trying to act as an intermediary where the pricing would be shared with us and we wouldn't share it outside P&L. And again, the idea here is that we're just trying to make sure that this is within the price criteria that is set and nothing more than that. Whether or not it's well below it or just below it, we're not trying to provide that information. We're just trying to validate that does meet some pricing criteria. And we did say, well, let's say just if someone's going to provide us that pricing, that it should just be distributor net and a quantity of 25. This in no way is a buy order or anything else. It's just a criteria because pricing for lighting definitely matters which level of pricing it's involved and quantity. So again, all we're trying to do is trying to play an intermediary saying so that when we kind of talk about it, yes, products exist and they aren't super expensive, and that's all we're trying to do. We don't want to come between manufacturers and end users and their relationships with contractors or any other agencies. We're just trying to help validate some of the price points. All right, so last and final poll question. I'm going to kick it over. So this is just what price premium. It's pretty straightforward, but what price premium for a fixture with this driver and port, not including, obviously the sensor is going to be a different price. A gateway, all those type of things when you get to the IoT world is going to add other costs. We totally get that, but we're just talking at the fixture level, that driver and that port. Obviously here are the answers, or not here are the answers, here are the options. No adder, and then different price points, 3% all the way up to 20%. This is just trying to help us get some of these answers. I do appreciate the feedback we're getting directly. Some of it, I think, is coming directly to me and not to everybody. I understand in some of these chats, not everybody is willing to share information for different reasons. So I'm seeing some of these feedback directly to me. I appreciate it. One person is making some good comments here, and I will follow up with you. I have at least 2 questions I can answer. So this is good. And I do appreciate the poll feedback question too. About price relating to luminaire type. So that's helpful to know. And if you could, if you're willing to provide direct feedback to us. So I don't have an answer or a suggestion how to mitigate that at the moment, but if you're willing to say more feedback there, super helpful. All right, so I'm gonna end the polling and we're gonna share the results. All right, so it appears 5 to 10%, both equal percentages in responses. Okay, so that's helpful. We got a mixture of answers. Okay, so this brings us to here. Some people have asked for this information before. I made sure I was going to have it. So the performance targets, they're listed at that URL at the bottom. I think you may have seen them if you attended. So this is a good question. Someone's asking how you would participate in this challenge. So I'm going to assume you're a manufacturer, and then I'll also talk about how if you're an end user and how you're not, if you're neither a manufacturer or an end user. So first, let's start with the manufacturers. Well, actually, anybody can answer these questions. We have the performance targets. We are looking for comments on them by August 10th. That allows us to process them to this email address. We are ideally going to compile and address those comments, and then we finalize those performance requirements by sometime in September. I put early. If we get 1 or 2 comments, that's easy. If we get 1,000 comments, that has its own challenges. So ideally, if you're a manufacturer, here's how you participate. You would say in September, yes, we think this is a good idea. We think we can meet these requirements. And then therefore you tell us that you plan to submit. We'd ask for you to do that by the end of September. Then we would actually ask for some documentation. This is included in the performance targets, but this is mostly to make sure that you've read them and you understand what we're asking for, as well as we actually say, oh yes, this product does meet these requirements, and it all makes sense. We might do a physical evaluation. It's listed as an inclusion, and then we would try to promote it. So the idea here is if it gets sold, if it gets built and gets installed in places, we'd like to try to recognize people for that. We'd like to recognize the end users. We'd like to recognize the manufacturers. This is about moving the market along. So we'd like to celebrate who's doing that. So that's how, as a manufacturer, you might participate in this. If you're an end user, similar concept. You could just provide your feedback. You then get to kind of hang out and wait while products are hopefully being developed. But as an end user, we would reach out to you and ask you, would you be able to provide maybe a quote about why you support this idea? Would you be willing to provide feedback, or would you be interested in possibly specifying it? We would also try to develop we are very close to publicizing more who the entities are that are really driving this. So we're getting very close to being able to do that. And so we, as an end user, you might want to be listed there. And then ultimately, once these products are on the market, we would like to reach out and try to really work with end users and say, well, hey, here's 3 or 4 products that could meet your needs, and see what they like about them, and those type of things, and see how and possibly even how the upgrading might work, and those type of things, that type of benefit. So that's how a manufacturer can participate. That's how an end user can participate. If you're an if you're an ESCO, you're kind of like an end user because you're ultimately probably doing a turnkey purchase. That's how you would participate. If you're a utility or an efficiency organization, we'd love your feedback on the challenge requirements. We'd also like to know how about possibly integrating this into your programs or programs. So there's another one. If you're not a utility, a manufacturer, or an end user, reach out to us. We'd still love you to participate and like to figure out how we can. I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to take a breath, and I'm going to scroll up to the questions. Moving through at least the private questions that came to me. So I provided our contact information. It's there. Please reach out. Please feel free to shoot me an email. The lighting challenge one is a collective. More people will read that as well. I'll also share it with our team members. There is a good question here related. Oh, someone asked a question about missing part of it. We did broadcast at the beginning of it that we were recording this conversation or presentation. Once that whole gets worked through its internet magic, we'll make sure it's available for viewing on demand if that's your interest. This is a good question, and I mentioned earlier Zaga Book 20, and Zaga Book 20 really relates to interior fixtures and really the interface between the light fixture and the sensor module. Someone asked a question about specifically high bay fixtures and or parking garage fixtures, and why not using Zaga Book 18 versus Zaga Book 20. And I'm going to go with a simple answer of, we're going to get back to you. I have some ideas. I mean, so Zaga Book 18, just so those of you that are not on may not be reading those on Friday nights like I do, Zaga Book 18 really is related to outdoor, similar concept. Parking garage fixtures is always one of those that is always kind of, is it an interior fixture versus an exterior fixture? I suspect some of the elements of Zaga Book 18 also might deal with some weather issues. But so again, I'm not answering that question at the moment, mainly because we need more research, and there's nothing wrong with taking it in, and we'll get back to you. It's the best answer I can give you. I did make a comment about, we are focusing on interior lighting. There are manufacturers out there who are developing similar technologies for downlights and or decorative lighting. The current focus has mostly been on these kind of high use fixtures, but I would say please provide more feedback about how it's worked. Also, any knowledge base you have about some of the challenges or successes with these types of integration. We'd like to benefit from your knowledge, and we'd like any feedback. If you feel that it should be more fixture types, that's also good feedback. I'm reading through the comments, and unfortunately they all came privately, which I appreciate. I like the feedback. So I'm just kind of reading them, even though my other colleagues are on the other line, they can't see everything that I can see. I appreciate anyone that's provided information related to pricing and how it might vary. Any more detailed questions? I used to be a designer. I totally understand the pricing mechanisms, but I don't know them at that level. I don't know exactly how certain features might affect how a Zaga port and a driver might be differently priced for, let's say, a troffer versus a high bay. I have some ideas, but any feedback there would be super helpful, and I appreciate that. We've shared all of our contact. And we have one person who's reached out. I appreciate that. I think we had a communication gap in the shared email box that I think we got fixed, and I apologize for that. We'll verify that because I'm not recognizing the email, but I know we had a problem with the where the emails were going and living. First off, thank you for your desire and interest to participate. We will correct that issue, and if you have, we look forward to it. And yes, high bay and parking garage, we consider them linear. So yes, they are elements that can be included in the challenge. We hope that manufacturers do see there is interest. This is retailers and end users and commercial and offices do want these type of features. And we think most of them all right there are ready to kind of just be bundled together. And we're hoping some of you manufacturers will rise to it's very hard not to say challenge too many times. I apologize. So I'm going to take another breath. I think I've gotten through most of the private questions. There are a couple more private questions that have been asked that are a little detailed, and I can't extemporaneously even address them right now. So we'll take those in and try to process them and follow up separately. So I do appreciate the questions. I am a pretty stickler for trying to respect your time though. So we have about 8 minutes. Our contact information is there. I'm gonna involve both my co-collaborators on this project, Kate and Gabe, in case there's something they're seeing that I'm not seeing. Are there any questions or any details I may have missed? That's an important thing. If there was something that glaring that I completely didn't tell them, anything that on your ends that I should have mentioned, please let me know.
There was just one question that came into me about where the slide deck or video might be shared after the presentation. So if you know that right now, that's great.
Good question. We have all of your contact information because you signed up. So we will, that gets into just where it has to live, and I don't want to share a URL without it being, I don't want to share a URL without it being right. We will include a notice to everybody that has registered once this is available on where you can view it on demand, as well as additional updates. So I'm sitting here quietly, I'm sorry, and one way it's different, so I don't know if there's any out there. I am, like I said, feel free, I can't see who's connected, how many people are connected at the moment. So if there's any additional questions, feel free to continue to submit them. Feel free to, thank you for the feedback. Really, any feedback is always appreciated. I grew up with a copy editor for a parent, so I'm used to having a piece of paper with full of red marks thrown at me. That's okay. I got tough skin. Please continue to provide whatever feedback you have, and appreciate this. We think there's good interest on both sides, the end users and manufacturers, and look forward to taking the next steps.
Michael, it's Gabe. I guess I got just one thing to say, and you said it quickly there, but I want to make sure people caught it. And that's, there's a webinar upcoming from the IES. It's August 10th, is that right? And it's specifically going to be on D4I. So if you want to get more of an understanding about this new D4I standard, I think it's pretty exciting, kind of the momentum and interest around it, then check out that webinar from IES.
Thank you. I'm just make clarification. It's August 12th. It's a Thursday, 2 Thursdays from today. Thank you for that. Yeah, and yes, I agree. Some good interest in where a lot of interest around the topic, and for an industry that has somewhat embraced standardization on and off, it seems to be a lot more interest in getting some of these data points standardized. I agree. I thank you. I can't be there to shake your hands or other things in the room with you, but thank you for your time. I will stay on for the remaining 4 minutes. I really appreciate attending, the feedback. I'm hoping to get more feedback at the email addresses and the phone number presented there. And we look forward to more. Starting to see a couple of you guys dropping off, so that's good. Or not good, but I understand we are all back-to-back meetings at this point. Love hearing coordinating feedback. Appreciate it. I like to hear the feedback. Seeing some old friends on here as well. So it's when normally we would have had these meetings actually at IS conference or many of the other conferences where we're not seeing each other. So I appreciate those of you that attended. Appreciate the feedback that you're grouping with your teams. We look forward to it. Thank you. All right, at this point, I am going to end the recording and start the disconnect process. So thank you, stay safe, stay cool wherever you are, unless you're in the Bay Area, stay warm because it's like 55 degrees there. Yes, thank you and have a nice weekend.